All right, we got some Warrior news and potentially how you're looking at it. It could be thought of as positive here. And it's two surgeries from our young Warrior guard slash wings. Let's start with Moses Moody getting a surgery on his UCL of his right thumb, the ligament in his right thumb. And when you look at the surgery and the symptoms, it's pretty much everything that would bother a basketball player. The ability to grip, pinch, stability, and not to mention his right shooting hand. Now, Moses, what did he go? There was a streak of 0 of 15 towards the end of those playoffs before he finally got benched. And I was highly critical of Moses during this playoff run, and now it kind of starts to make sense. I give him a lot of credit and a lot of respect for hiding this injury, football style, right? Like, don't give the other team a target. It was a smart move, especially probably against the Rockets, right? Don't let them know this is where I'm hurt and try to injure that. But he shot the ball miserably. And in the regular season, he may have been able to get away with it, but the lack of confidence and kind of an undecisiveness during this playoff run, where in the playoffs, the windows, the gaps to attack, they're much smaller because the intensity of the defense, it killed him out there, to the point where eventually in that Wolves series, he was basically benched. But so it all adds up now. My apologies for being so critical of Moses. But again, we didn't know. We didn't know. He thought he was healthy. It was just like, dude, what's going on? You don't look like the same guy. You got to shoot with more confidence. How come you can't make open shots? And so hopefully, there's no repercussions for this surgery. They say he'll be ready for training camp. And, Moses, he took such leaps defensively as a POA defender and distance managing, using his 7-foot wingspan to disrupt dribble and rhythm. He took such a leap there defensively. I don't have a problem headed into next season with Moses as a starter. Now, in an ideal world, he's probably more in that GP2 role, right? Where 6th, 7th guy comes off the bench, defends, spots up in the corner, that type of role. But we don't live in an ideal world. And so, hopefully, that Moses' thumb is better. And again, we talked about Steph's thumb all the way into these playoffs and throughout these playoffs. And hoopers, like your thumb, and you don't even have to be a hooper. When you hurt your thumb, you realize, like, man, that my thumb is way more of my hand than I had realized. You take it for granted, but it really is kind of like half your hand, the way we're designed. And so for a shooter to have an injured thumb on their shooting hand, he has an absolute legit excuse to why he didn't look like Moses Moody in the playoffs, why he couldn't shoot the ball. Brandon Pajemski underwent debridement surgery. Am I saying that right? On Tuesday? Essentially, it's an arthroscopic surgery where they remove debris and inflammation in his left wrist. Again, shooting hand for Pajemski. And I'm not surprised at this one, in the sense of he's had that wrist wrapped for a lot of the season, and he takes so many falls. He hits the ground so much, landing, bracing yourself on your wrist and stuff like that. And so, not that I knew he needed surgery or was injured, but not startling considering his playing style. And the thing to me is, with Podz, his wrist, his release is everything in his shot. When he sticks the follow through, let's go with the left here, even though it looks weird for me. Like when it's his wrist snap, sometimes it's too violent and he snake bites it and pulls it back. In my studying of his game, watching him for 2 seasons now, like, to me, when he's in rhythm, when he's making shots, it's the smooth follow through on the wrist. And so, hopefully there's, again, no repercussions of this injury, and he maybe gets more range of motion in that shooting wrist to stick the follow through, because, both he and Moses just didn't shoot well in the playoffs. I don't think we can write it off to all of this. This certainly gives them both legitimate excuses, but I think also the size, the physicality, and the playoff defense affected them as well. 2 matchups with these jumbo front courts, certainly didn't help. And again, I'll kind of echo the same sentiment about Moses, where, like, okay, Podz, he may remain a starter, I'm fine with it. But again, in an ideal world, really, Podz and Mo are our second unit backcourt. But again, we don't live in an ideal world. And the reality is that we're going to need both Brandon and Moses to be around 40% three-point shooters. I'm not saying they got to be at 40, but 37, 38, we need them to be efficient three-point shooters for the juice to be worth the squeeze ultimately if they're going to play heavy minutes. That said, when you talk about the moves this summer, making moves, making deals, you heard Shams the other day say this may be the craziest offseason we've seen in the NBA as far as trades being made. All these teams are going to ask for both of these guys. I'm not saying as a centerpiece in a trade, but they're two young rotational players on value contracts. And you see where the league is headed. Everyone's ducking that second apron. You look at this Pacers and Thunder, and we'll talk about them here in a second, where the league is headed with depth and over, star power. And so I'm not saying, that you throw them into a deal. They certainly can't just be a throw-in. But if it makes sense, it makes sense. I wouldn't be shocked if either one of them were involved in a big deal to land a player that the Warriors covet. Not saying I want it to happen, but again, these teams, when these negotiations are happening and how complicated the CBA is, where you have to make multiple player trades. These one-off trades are very difficult now with the way things are headed. Teams are going to be asking for Podz. They're going to be asking for Moses because of their value. They can play right away, and their ceiling because their trajectory. So that's that. But ultimately, I feel better with the news because they don't sound like they're the type of surgeries where, again, it's going to linger and it's going to be a problem. And now it's kind of two legitimate excuses for both of our young guys and why they shot the ball so purely. I don't want to put it all on that, but it's like, especially with Moses, right? It's like, okay. How can you not make a shot anymore? And then it got in his head and then he couldn't, he was indecisive and it was bad, right? But now it makes sense. And Podz getting the wrist cleaned up, hopefully he can get back to shooting the way he did towards the end of the year and continue to develop that mid-range game. Underdog. You can use the code Alchemy for 50% bonus on your first deposit, up to 1,000 credits. They're running boosts the rest of these playoffs. You can check every day. I've hit a couple in a row. For this Game 5 Knicks Pacers, I am going to go Brunson higher than 7.5 free throws. Back in the Garden, I expect him to, that's not asking a lot with his playing style. And then I'm going to go, how about Benedict Mathurin entering the chat in that Game 4 where he just came, he's been really bad. He's a volatile player, right? He's a volatile player. And I was cracking up. I had a breakdown of this on my Patreon where, listen, I went in on the Knicks and how I feel. I'm not a fan of Brunson ball. I'm not. I respect how effective he is. I don't like watching it. And I don't believe that it's a winning recipe ultimately, as we're finding out on this stage. But Mathurin, I expect him to have another solid game higher than 6.5 points. That's Underdog. You can click the link in the description. Play it with boosts. Play it with me. Support the channel. But, part of my takeaway in this Knicks series is the team's personality, any team's personality, their identity is ultimately going to be formed by their best player. And when you look at the Knicks and how Brunson dominates the ball, it breeds an identity of selfishness. And they don't really have any, as Steve Kerr would call them, connectors. Josh Hart is really their only connector. Everyone else is a finisher and a scorer in mentality. And when Brunson plays the way he does, where he's constantly looking for his, again, it becomes contagious. And so when OG gets the ball, when Cat gets the ball, when McBride gets the ball, they're looking for theirs because that's the identity they've formed. They're not looking to make the extra pass. And as you get further along in the playoffs and the familiarity builds with each game, it becomes super difficult. Defensively, Cat and Brunson, I don't know if you have an answer for that long term. You can say it's fatigue, But ultimately, you got Brunson basically running away from switching, tagging and just getting caught in no man's land. Cat with his feet in cement when guys turn the corner. I don't know how you're going to stop this high-powered offense that way, right? And then in contrast, you look at Halliburton, the ultimate connector in today's game. He's a savant, man. And listen, when he had that hamstring injury last season, I remember at one point having the take like, dude, he might be, when we look at these super maxes, he might be one of the worst that got the 200 plus, because after that hamstring injury, he just wasn't the same guy the rest of the year. And it was like, is he going to be not durable? I think he re-aggravated. And you look at his build and stuff, and it was like, he's going to always be kind of chipped up. And it robbed him of his confidence and aggression. But clearly he's gotten it back. And you have to admire, I really just love the Pacers style of basketball, but I've never seen a guy leave his feet more to make a pass and get away with it. And you've heard him say, like, he practices it. Listen, all these De'Aaron Fox, Ja Morant, with their verticality and their athleticism, all these guys could practice it and get the skill of it down. But what you can't teach is the timing and the processing of Halliburton, the feel, if you will, right? That's just a God-given trait that Halliburton has, because when he gets in the air, he has basically two reads when he's in the air. He knows one read he wants to go, and then he's got a second one. And so a lot of the time you see him kind of get in the air, double clutch the ball. The first read isn't there, and then he pings the second read right on target. So the 15 assists, no turnovers. And again, back to the identity of the Pacers, because their best player is always looking to make the basketball play and the quick pass, they all do eventually, right? They all start to form that identity, and the ball gets pinged around, and the pace, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a team score more off a made basket in like one or two dribbles, 94 feet. Siakam fits perfectly with it, right? And so, yeah, the Knicks, I wouldn't be surprised if they got this one in the Garden and they just have a heroic effort from Brunson, but ultimately they're not going to get out of this series, and it's a win for basketball. I'm sorry, New York fans. Like, I'm happy that y'all are back relevant and on the stage, but I don't believe in the style of play, and the Pacers winning this series is a win for basketball. And then you're going to get this Thunder-Pacers series where I know ESPN and the NBA, they're probably not thrilled about the potential ratings of the series, but the real hoop heads, the purists, this is an exciting series because you've got the best team defense in the Thunder. They're switching, they're rotating, it's seamless. They're on a string, and they do all you look at the Wolves, you look at the Knicks, and you look at Randall and Naz Reid and Cat and Brent and all these little mistakes that they make in defensive coverage. There's this gray area of stuff that you can't really coach into a player. They kind of just either have a feel for it or not. And the Thunder just have it in spades defensively. Caruso, Chet, Kaysen, all of them, Dort, they have that part of the game that the coach can't explain to you defensively. You just have to know how to do it. You have to distance manage, right? They all have it. And they're all on a string. And so that's why you're seeing, the most devastating defense maybe we've seen of this decade, this era. There's been a few, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong, against, again, this Pacers, the best team offense we've seen in a long time, where you don't know where the attack's coming from. Obviously, Halliburton is the guy down the stretch, and he's hit a bunch of clutch baskets. It could be Nesmith. It could be Siakam. It could be a top and lob from the baseline. And so that contrast of the best team offense versus the best team defense is exciting to me as just a hoop head, and watching to see if Halliburton can decipher this Thunder defense, and is the equalizer to OKC's defense the pace of the Pacers. If they can get it down quick, 2-3 passes, does that eventually wear down this Thunder's defense? So I'm excited. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself in this finals matchup, but I'm intrigued with it, and I will be covering it on my Patreon as well as the Valkyries. I know I left y'all hanging with that first Liberty matchup. I had to make an executive decision with the help of my patrons. A lot of them wanted me to cover the Knicks-Pacers game, so I vetoed or I bounced to that instead of that Valkyries Liberty game, seeing as, it looked like it looked like one of them club games you go to where you're like, whoa, like these two teams shouldn't be playing, right? Well, they've got another chance against the defending champion Liberties today in New York. And so I'm curious to see how they respond and if they can make it competitive. But I'll have a breakdown of those two games on the Patreon. Going to cover the finals. And it's a good time for basketball. Again, Underdog, links in the description. My picks have been hitting of late. And as always, hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.